and welcome back to Mads World. I'm your host Mads, and I hope you've been enjoying the show so far. If you have, please remember to subscribe, rate and review the podcast, as it's the simplest way to help out the show. Or find me on social media and tell your friends about it. This episode of Mads World is sponsored by Luvis and their luxury water-based lubricants. I'm so excited to be partnering with them, not only because they're UK-based, but because they were also featured in Red Magazine as one of the top 15 intimate moisturizers. I love that the design is super subtle, classy, and aesthetically pleasing, which all stems from their desire to create a luxury intimate product that can be displayed alongside other body products and interior accessories. At Luvis, they believe intimate pleasure isn't just for the sexually confident. They make products that encourage everyone to discover the wonders of their own body, even those of us who don't want to shout about it from the rooftops. With a lush blend of chamomile, green tea, and aloe vera to nourish and hydrate the intimate area, Luvis is also free from fragrance, glycerin, parabens, and known skin irritants. It also doesn't have that gross sticky texture that some lubes have. Check out Luvis at the link in my bio and use the code MADS20 for 20% off on their website on your first purchase. This week I'm joined by multi-award-winning content creator, host, author, and body image advocate Stephanie Yeboah. With a blog spanning over 14 years, Stephanie has been an active and influential presence within the creator space, writing and creating content surrounding a variety of subjects including plus-size fashion, beauty and skincare, travel and lifestyle, as well as providing witty, raw takes and perspectives on all things to do with pop culture. She also dedicates her time towards advocacy within the body acceptance, mental health and self-love communities, sharing her own challenges and traumas involving experiencing fat phobia, bullying, self-esteem and confidence issues, and the ways in which she's been able to turn it around while encouraging others to do the same. In 2020, she released her debut non-fiction novel, Fattily Ever After, a fat black girl's guide to living life unapologetically, which became an Amazon bestseller in its first week of publication. In the same year, she became the first British plus-size black woman to grace the cover of Glamour magazine UK. Stephanie has appeared on Sky News, BBC Radio 4, ITV News, MTV UK and Good Morning Britain, just to name a few, as well as a plethora of podcasts. Stephanie currently has an active social media presence with over 350,000 followers across her social media accounts worldwide. In this episode, we discuss Steph's journey towards self-acceptance, the role mental health plays, maintaining mental well-being, inclusivity and acceptance for diverse populations, the influence of social media and advertising industries, plus-size fashion, and radical fat acceptance. Hello, Steph.
Hello.
How are you?
I am doing well, thank you. I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm really good this morning, thank you. I've just had a little coffee. I'm feeling like super buzzed to be chatting to you because, as I was saying, I'm a huge fan of yours, so it's really exciting.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really looking forward to it. Should be really good.
Nice. Let's jump into our speed date question round so everyone listening can learn a bit more about you. Mm-hmm. So my first question is, can you tell me about your journey as a content creator and how this began and how it's changed over time and evolved?
Yeah, sure. So I started, this is years ago now. 2008 was when I started my first blog, which was on blogger.com.
Oh my God.
This is like way back in the archives.
Yeah.
I was at university. I was in my second year and I was studying law. Kind of just sort of against my will. My parents, immigrant parents wanted their daughter to be an academic and, all that, the story of that. And I was like a creative at heart. And so when I was studying law, I needed a creative outlet. And so I started the blog. And this was during a time when there weren't really a lot of people blogging at the time. It was like Zoella and then like a couple of people here and there. So it was sort of like bare bones beginning. And I started doing a lot of stuff on like lifestyle and a lot of comic books, sci-fi, video games, because I was a huge nerd. So my blog at the time was called Nerd About Town.
That's why your Gmail is Nerd About Town.
Yeah,
that.
Yeah, when I changed it to my name, I couldn't bear to part with the emails. I was like,
so random. I love it.
I'm gonna keep it. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so I was talking a lot about that because I'd always had a huge love of fashion, style, but at the time when it came to plus size fashion, there was virtually nothing for us. The mainstream stores weren't creating plus size clothing, and the plus size stores that were. The outfits were quite dowdy and matronly and just very old. And, you know, as a young adult, I wanted clothes that I could wear, you know, the same as my peers. And I was also going through some really bad issues with self-confidence, self-love. I had a lot of self-hatred in me that had kind of stemmed from a child in terms of how I was received because of my looks. And so after a few years, after I graduated, I was writing a lot more on my blog as I was working full time. And it got to a point where I made the decision to start writing my musings and my thoughts on self-confidence and self-love, because it had gotten to the point where I'd sort of like grown up just having a host of sort of eating disorders and really terrible dating experiences and just struggling with my body. And I started writing about that very frankly on the blog. And it was also around the time 2014 when ASOS released their plus size range, which was monumental at the time. It was like a huge thing. They were like one of the first straight size brands to actually create a curve range. And so I was like, okay, this is my moment. I'm going to start doing fashion on the blog. And so that was kind of when I started properly doing a lot of style and sort of the lifestyle and fashion bits, but also bringing it back to the sentiments of self-love, sort of trying to increase my self-esteem, linking fashion to self-esteem and all of that kind of stuff. And I slowly began to build an audience around that. And kind of one thing led to another. I just was continuing to be really consistent and creating content both on my blog and on Instagram and self-shooting a lot of my things. And now we're here now we're here.
And how did this ladder up to your book, Fattily Ever After, as well? I'd love if you could tell our listeners a bit about the themes in that and how you sort of got the idea to write that.
Yeah, sure. So being in at the time, the body positivity community, it was something that sort of between 2014 and 2017, it was something that I was really happy to be a part of, because it was part of the reason why I was able to sort of increase my confidence and learn how to love myself. However, what I noticed and what a lot of us noticed in the communities, especially in the UK and the US, was as the rise of plus size influencers became a thing and the body positive community, as it started to get a lot more exposure and visibility, a lot of us noticed that it was only a certain type of body type that was being showcased and being featured. And considering the history of the body positive community and how it, for the most part, stems from the work of plus size Black women, specifically in the US, it felt like we were being erased. So every time I would sort of open a magazine or see an article on body positivity, it always featured sort of mid-sized, white, very conventionally attractive women talking about their struggles and talking about, you know, their rise to confidence and things. And it left out the perspectives and the thoughts and the feelings of peoples whose bodies are more oppressed. So I'm talking like larger fat women, disabled women, Black women, women of color. Like, these are the perspectives that we weren't hearing about with this rise of body positivity. And it was really important to me to hear the perspectives of women of color when it comes to this community, because we were the ones that helped get it to where it was. So to be so kind of viciously erased from the movement didn't sit well with me at all. So I had the idea to write a book that not only talked about my experiences growing up as a dark-skinned Black plus size woman in the UK, but I also wanted to include the experiences of other larger plus size women and Black plus size women around the world. So the book is kind of set out into different sections. So we've got things like dating, mental health, the media, and how we're portrayed in the media, dating, like all of those kinds of different sections. So in each section, it's got sort of the academic text behind it, like the history of fat phobia and all of these kinds of things. And then it's got my experience of that specific section. And then we've got the experiences of women that I'd interviewed.
I can't wait to read it. It sounds fantastic. And it's so on brand for this podcast as well. I've had so many guests that love chatting about those themes, and I'm really looking forward to chatting to you a bit more about that later on. My next question for this round was, what is your favorite, most recent pop culture moment or trend?
My favorite pop culture moment recently
Yeah.
has been the rise of Pedro Pascal. I'm sorry.
Oh.
I love that man. And I'm one of those people where I'm like, where were you when he was in Narcos? And where were you guys when he was in Game of Thrones? Like, I have loved him for like 7 years.
Gatekeeping him, like, you're like, he's mine.
Absolutely. And I'm just like, I'm so happy that he's now getting his flowers. And you know, the whole daddy thing, it was starting to get a bit creepy. I was starting to feel a bit sorry for him because it seemed like it was happening all the time. But he's just so great. He's so sweet. I love him.
And he's such a like good example of like a non-creepy, inclusive, hot guy that is just like, and I feel like he wants to give a voice to so many people as well. Like he's very, I hate the word woke, but he is a very woke guy. And I feel like him working alongside, who was his co-star in The Last of Us? They're non-binary. But he's such a good support for them. And it's so amazing to see. And I just feel like he really embodies everything that I want older white men to be.
Absolutely. He's just great. And he's just so hot. And he's just so like, he just seems so cool and down to earth and fun. And yeah, I love him.
Absolutely amazing. And my next question is, what is your greatest achievement?
My greatest achievement, I think, it's maybe two. So one of them is definitely the book, because I never thought in my lifetime that I would ever write a book. So that was a really cool thing for me. I'm really, really proud of it. And then I think generally just the second one is getting to a point where I could say that I love myself and I love my body. Because growing up, I had a host of just loads of issues, and I never thought I would ever get to a place where I could say that I'm actually happy in the body and the skin that I'm in. I'm somebody that suffers from depression as well, so I could never see that far ahead into the future where I would ever say, actually, do you know what, I'm okay looking the way I do. And you know, it's taken so many years to get to this point, and I'm really proud of everything that I've kind of accomplished with regards to doing the work to become more confident in my skin and to become more self-assured.
And that's such a good self-achievement as well, because I feel like your opinion of yourself and the way that you feel in your own body and in your own skin just ladders up to every other success that you're going to have in life as well, because that allows you to put yourself out there and achieve more and be striving for more just because you have that belief in yourself. I think that's so cool and so important.
Oh, thank you so much.
My next question was, what is your least favorite modern dating trend?
Least favorite modern dating trend.
It's a tough one because there's so much toxicity in modern dating. It's hard to choose.
Yeah, and I've been out of the game for like a year and a half now, so I don't even know what the babes are doing in terms of that kind of thing. But I guess, do you know what I don't like? Breadcrumbing.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I find that so annoying, where it's like they just kind of leave just enough for you to kind of cling on, but they really don't actually they don't want anything to do with you, but there's that arrogant sort of self-obsessed part of them that still wants you to kind of be following them. So they leave you little trails here and there, like little bits of affection for you to hang on. It's so manipulative.
And it's like you finally move on from that person, and it's not even moving on like you had feelings for them. It's like, I was actually reading in it was Bell Hooks's All About Love, and there's this term in there where she talks about this concept of cathaxis, and it honestly opened my eyes so much. So cathaxis is like someone or something that is just, it's all consuming. You put all your mental energy into it, and people confuse it all the time with love and like feelings of affection. And that's what she says in a lot of abusive relationships. People think that love and abuse can coexist, where actually it's more like abuse and cathaxis, where it's like you're obsessed with someone, your life revolves around them, you're putting a lot of your time and energy into them, but it's not actually love. It's more just like an ongoing connection that you can't move on from, because she says that in life, abuse and love can't coexist because they're completely opposite. It's so fascinating.
Oh, do you know what? That is one, I'm so ashamed to admit, that is one book I still haven't gotten around to reading.
Very tough to read. It took me
It's
forever.
really
Yeah.
tough in terms of like just how she writes, or emotionally how it makes you feel.
A bit of both, but the writing of it is just very like, I found myself reading the same sentence again and again because like I want to like absorb it and understand it rather than just read it and move on and not actually interpret it for what it is, if you know what I mean. So it just took forever, but really worth reading, definitely.
Yeah, I think I'll have to read it because I've had such a complicated relationship with love, and I think that's why I've been so resistant to read it, because I'm just like, I just want to stay in my ignorant bubble over here. I don't want to be dragged today, Belle. No,
not today. Oh, love it. And my last question for this round is, what's the funniest DM that you've ever received? Because I love asking people with lots of followers this, because you must just get some of the most cursed things coming into your DMs.
Oh my gosh. So one that I can think of off the bat was so in like African communities, we have like this really annoying thing where we've got like the uncles, not like physical, like, you know, our real life uncles, but it's just like a brand of older man who's really creepy towards younger girls. You know, they dress in like double denim suits and slippers. It's just very cringy. So we call them like uncles. They're always like cruising for younger girls, and they're like balding, and they're just so I tend to get a lot of messages from those kinds of uncles. And I remember one guy, he must have been about like 55. Oh, God. And he commented, it was one of those DMs where he quoted my picture in the feed, and then he kind of sent me my own picture back. Oh, God. And then he quoted saying, in this picture, you're looking really succulent. Oh my God. And I was just like, that... So, like I'm some kind of like pig
peach.
like a pig on a spit. Like I was just like, succulent? What does that even mean? And I was just like, this is the most random DM. I've never been called succulent before, and I actually wasn't sure whether to like be offended or actually be like impressed, because I was like, oh, like
stand out.
Come on, thesaurus. Like, okay, succulent.
Like but succulent, juicy peach, or like a succulent, like juicy pig on a spit.
Yeah. And I was just like, I'm so shocked by this, but also I'm like, okay, good, like, okay, fair enough. But...
I wonder if that's worked for him in the past, and now he's like, I'm just going to say succulent at all times.
And I'm just like, that's a cool adjective to use. So then I started, like, for a time, I started describing everything as succulent, because I was like, we need to use that word more often. Like, I just love it.
It really impacted your life.
It really did. There are so many random words that impact my life. So I'm just like, okay,
Let's go with it.
That's the word of the year.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much for doing the speed date question round. It's always so much fun. And I'm really looking forward to chatting more about the themes in your book. So we touched on this briefly before when you were chatting about how you came up with the concept for Fattily Ever After. And I wanted to chat with you first up about mental health and in your journey towards self-acceptance, which from what I understand you chat about in the book, which I haven't actually read yet, disclaimer, but I'm really looking forward to reading. How has mental health played a role for you, and what strategies or practices have helped you in maintaining mental well-being?
It's so the journey to self-love, especially when you have a mental health condition, it just adds on an extra layer of fuckery. It really does, because it's so easy to revert back to the way you used to be, especially when you have relapses. And so when I was 14, I was diagnosed with depression because of all of the stuff that I was going through, and trauma and bullying and all of that kind of stuff. And then I also have DID, which is dissociative identity disorder.
Oh, wow.
And that really, do you know what? It didn't actually impact my mental health as much as the depression did, because at least with the DID, for the most part, I'm not even aware when it's happening. So a lot of the time I'm not really internalizing or thinking about it. But with depression, it was a very tough journey trying to come up with the tools to be able to learn how to love myself, because I had
Yeah.
that little voice in the back of my head that was like, you're not good enough. You don't deserve to be here. You're not thin enough. You're not light enough. Lie down over here and just be catatonic. Don't move. Don't do that kind of stuff. And so I think the main tools that helped me with that was, and it's something that I advocate everybody do, regardless of if you are going through something or not, is therapy. Having different kinds of talking therapies really, really helped me, because I think at the time I felt so, one of the main reasons why I felt so low in myself was because I just felt unheard. I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel like anybody could relate to what I was going through. I was very introverted. I didn't have a lot of friends. My family, being African as well, mental health is something that isn't spoken about. It's still seen as taboo. So I literally had nowhere to turn to,
I'm
nobody
so
to speak
sorry.
to. Oh, it's all good. It's all part of the growth
Part of the
growth
journey.
journey.
Yeah.
It is, yeah. And
Yeah.
so I would keep things inside for very long amounts of time, and I just felt like I was going to burst, full of all of this negativity. And actually, starting cognitive behavioral therapy was something that was just so, like, just the mere fact that I could go somewhere and this person was like, tell me how you feel, was life changing for me, because
Yeah.
up until then I felt like nobody cared or wanted to know how I'd felt. I remember when I was at the really bad parts of my bullying in school, and I decided to tell my dad, or speak to my dad and say, this is what's been going on for the last 4 years. I've been getting bullied, and I'll always remember this as long as I live. He said, well, if you weren't so fat, then you wouldn't be getting bullied. And
Oh,
that really,
Steph.
as a child, that stayed with me for
Yeah.
years and years and years. And so I blamed myself for being bullied. I blamed myself for being ostracized and for my body being policed. I didn't see the problem as other people. I saw the problem with myself. And, if you have somebody that is supposed to be a caretaker and somebody that's supposed to look after you, essentially blaming you for your own abuse and your own trauma, it really stays with you for a long time. And so being able to speak about that with somebody was life changing. And I think that's kind of what led me to start writing my blog, because I thought, well, I can kind of find comfort in strangers as opposed to people that actually know me, because it felt like nobody really wanted to listen. So combining therapy with taking antidepressants as well was something that really, really worked for me. And also, it's difficult, but learning how to cut off people that don't serve you, even if that means family members.
Really?
And I don't even mean cut off in a sense of, we're never speaking again, you are no longer a part of my life, but it could be things like emotionally, knowing that there are certain family members that I can't go to emotionally if I needed to talk, that kind of cutting off. So I found a family of sorts in friendships, and friendships that I've made online, friendships that I've made in person, they are kind of like my family now. And yeah, it's a difficult road when you have to incorporate mental health conditions into that path of becoming better, and it can be done. It just takes an extra ounce of strength and support from friends, family, strangers, professionals is so important to keep you on track.
Yeah. And in saying all of that, you touched on some really interesting points. So how can we ensure that mental health conversations are inclusive and they address the specific needs of a diverse population? Because as you said, there's so many factors that can influence the help that people are getting, or even the help that they feel that they deserve, that they should receive. How do you think we can shape these conversations to be more inclusive?
I think what needs to happen is that mental health needs to be decolonized. And it's weird to speak about it in that way, in that even when it comes to mental health, there is still a standard of beauty in that realm, which is wild. When we think about things such as bulimia, anorexia, eating disorders, we always think of a slim white woman or a very slim, very skinny white woman. People are unaware that black people can suffer from eating disorders. People are unaware that fat people can suffer from eating disorders. These things are all true, but because we don't see it when we look at campaigns or documentaries or wellness trips or whatever the case may be, we're not seeing ourselves represented in those areas, so people assume that they just don't happen in our communities when they do. When it comes to mental health, I think it's black women are the most were more likely to be locked up against our will or put on a hold, because we let the mental illness fester for so long until it gets to the point where we break. Because again, even in our own communities, we just don't talk about it. And I think we're getting better in terms of our generation. So in terms of like millennials and Gen Z, and with the introduction of things like TikTok and Instagram and stuff, I think the younger kids are becoming a lot more adept at being able to talk about this. But I think there needs to be so much work done in our community, so in the Afro-Caribbean community, where we have to now teach our parents about mental health, and we have to kind of educate them on how important it is for us to be able to share how we feel. I remember when I was younger, I used to get a lot of I used to suffer really badly from sleep paralysis.
Oh, really? Bad. I've had it only twice in my life, and it is honestly, it's horror. It's horrendous.
It's horrendous. And because it was so tied in with my depression as well, I would get it every day. Like for about 6 months, I got it all the time.
Yeah.
My mum thought that I was possessed by the devil.
Oh, God.
So I was telling her, look, I'm going to sleep. At the time, I didn't know what it was. So I was like, I'm going to sleep and there's something on my chest and I'm seeing really weird shadows and I can't move. And she was like, yeah, you're possessed. You've got an evil spirit. That's the devil. Yeah. So she got a pastor to come to my house.
Oh no!
To spray each room with holy water. Oh, and it was, and I was sitting there on the stairs looking at her like, really? This is like something out of Insidious. Like, what the hell? This is not bloody like an Annabelle movie. Like, I'm sure this is something scientific. Yeah. There's a scientific explanation for this. And yeah, eventually when I came across sleep paralysis and told my doctor, he was like, yeah, that's something that you have. And so it's even little things like that, where experiencing those kinds of things and being able to speak to our parents and being like, look, I'm not like quote unquote crazy. Like, we need to stop using that word. It's not this, it's not that. It's, I have feelings and they deserve to be expressed. So I think within our own communities, within the Afro-Caribbean community, we still have a lot of work to do to educate our parents on why it's important to talk about mental health. And then from a general point of view, I just think we need to have more communities and charities that are open to hearing from the perspectives of people that aren't necessarily like thin or white or conventionally attractive or male or whatever the case may be. There's a lot of work to be done, and I think having conversations like this where we can talk about the fact that yes, fat people can, suffer from eating disorders, but it just goes unseen because people see the fat and they're like, oh, she's doing good for herself, not knowing that we're starving ourselves. Talking about things like body image issues within the Black community. So people tend to assume that in the Black community, we don't have issues with body image because our standard of beauty is curves and everything, like curvy bodies and hourglass shapes. But then on the flip side of that, that is an unattainable body shape to have even in our community. Yes, it's more common for us to have that body shape, but then there are loads of us that aren't shaped like that, who are either too big or too small. And we're trying to live up to the ideal hourglass body shape as well, and doing terrible things to try and achieve that body shape. And so I think it's important for us to just be really open to the idea that, look, everybody is going through stuff, not just a certain demographic.
Yeah, and I suppose that the ensuring that mental health conversations are inclusive across different demographics, it's kind of the same for body acceptance. And would you say that there is a different way to approach body acceptance encompassing people of all backgrounds and experiences? Would you say that it is about listening to people that are going through those things and having those open discussions, or do you think there's more to it alongside the mental health discussions?
I think it's definitely about listening to those perspectives and being open to hearing what they have to say. I think when it comes to body image, it's a very thin line because it can be very personal, and you don't want to invalidate someone's experience of how they view their own bodies. And I think that's where it can get really tricky, because body image is such a sensitive subject for so many people, and you want to ensure that everybody gets their voices heard. But equally, it's also important to recognize or to realize that there are going to be bodies that are a lot more oppressed than someone else's. Now, that doesn't invalidate the feelings that they feel in their body. So you can be like a size 10, very fit, but you can have issues with your body. It doesn't invalidate how you feel, but it's also important to recognize that, look, the way you navigate through the world is not the way this person navigates through the world. So when somebody is talking about their experiences of fat phobia or whatever the case may be, it's important to not center yourself in that person's experiences. And if you can, it's important to kind of try and highlight or amplify that person's voice, because unfortunately, when it does come to body image, it just feels like a lot of the time people only want to hear, or they're only receptive to what we're saying through the lens of somebody that's more privileged. So, I could talk about how annoying it is that slow fashion or sustainable fashion, ethical fashion, they don't really do plus sizes. I could speak about that till I'm blue in the face, but it's only until a slimmer person retweets me or reposts my thing, then brands start paying attention, because they're seeing they're more likely to hear it from somebody that looks like them as opposed to somebody that looks different. And so it's just about not centering yourself in other people's experiences, and also amplifying the messages of the most oppressed to the masses.
And what are some good ways that people can challenge our own internal biases and encourage others to do the same? Because I feel like over the past, especially living in London, coming from Melbourne, moving to London, meeting more people of diverse backgrounds, I've done a lot, especially in COVID as well. I feel like I was having a lot of conversations with people. Like, I think maybe it was because it wasn't face to face. People felt a lot more comfortable to share and be honest about things, and because we were being honest about our mental health and how scared we all were, it opened up a lot of doors for those conversations. So I've had to do a lot of challenging my own internal biases, even before, when you were saying about, when you imagine, and this might just be like you were saying, centering myself when thinking about other people's experiences. But when thinking about anorexia, I do imagine a white woman. And I don't know if that's because I'm white or if that's because all the images that I've seen when I learned about that in school of white women. But I'm getting off track. But my question was, how can we best challenge our internal biases and encourage others?
I think it's become a lot more easier to do, and this it's very bittersweet. But since everything happened in 2020 with George Floyd and stuff, I think people have become a lot more open about challenging biases, especially from a racial point of view. I am of the opinion that it just needs to be said now, like no tiptoeing around it. We can't pussyfoot around, so to speak. So if something is happening to someone and you see it happening, to just call it out there and then. I find confronting the issue head on to be the most effective way. And of course you can say it in a way that, doesn't come across as like aggressive or like super challenging, but to kind of just let people know where you stand. I think issuing boundaries is very important when it comes to advocating for yourself as well. So for instance, if you're plus size and you're around friends and they're talking about, oh, they feel so fat, and you can just be like,
shut up.
Just like, first of all, fat is not a feeling. You cannot, like, I can't feel skinny because I'm not skinny or I'm not slim. So you don't feel fat. Maybe use another word. Maybe say you feel bloated or you feel lethargic or whatever the case may be. But Yeah, so if you have a friend that constantly talks about how fat they feel, or how, you know, they don't like the way they look because they're putting on weight, like, one thing that I like to say, which always tends to shut them up, is, look, I get that the thought of looking like me disgusts you, but please don't constantly bring it up to me, because you have friends that are fat, and when you say stuff like this, it makes us feel really horrible, because you're reinforcing the fact that looking like me is disgusting. And then they'll be like, oh no, but you're beautiful, you're this, you're that. So then I'm like, but if you think that I'm pretty or I'm attractive, then why would you say such things about, like, having excess body fat? And but to see, like, the kind of confusion in their eyes, and then trying to, like, actually be like, oh, actually you're right, is always a really good thing. So I think challenging people and issuing boundaries in terms of how people speak around us is really important. When it comes to things like mental health, you know, if you have friends that flippantly use certain words that are, you know, not politically correct or outdated, to always just say, look, please don't, you know, please don't say that, or please don't use terminology in that way. I'm very, when it comes to things like mental health, it's such a fine line for me, because you don't want to gatekeep mental health. That's the last thing you want to do. But there is a way of approaching it where, so for instance, because of my DID, so dissociative identity disorder used to be called multiple personality syndrome.
Oh, okay.
And they changed the meaning, or they changed the wording, because it was, multiple personality was just linked to, it was just it was always linked to something negative. It was stigmatized. And so when I would have friends who would talk about, oh yeah, this person's crazy, like she's just got two personalities in one, like she must be schizo. And I'd be like, please don't.
You're doing too much.
You're doing too much. It's like you're villainizing a mental health illness. And, you know, the ways in which different mental health illnesses are portrayed in the media specifically.
I was going to say this, in movies as well, even movies like Memento or movies like Identity, like this. And it's always a horror movie. It's never a fun comedy movie or like a nice, heartwarming drama. It's always like a scary movie, and the person is a scary villain.
Oh my gosh, exactly. And it's so frustrating. So, like, you know, when I would watch movies like Shutter Island, what is it, Joker, even Split, you know, these are movies that deal with dissociative identity disorder, and just seeing how, I mean, I must admit, with Joker, that was the one movie where I was like, actually, he does it very well. I know that there were a lot of controversies around the way that he portrayed it, but for some of us who do have that disorder, he actually did a really, really good job. So for that one, I'm a bit like, okay, but it's still linked to, you know, him being a villain. And it's just annoying how mental health is just portrayed as this villainous kind of, you know, thing. And so I think just calling things in, so not even necessarily calling it out in an aggressive way, but just saying, look, guys, we need to update our terminology. We need to update the way in which people see mental health illnesses, the ways that people see fatness, the ways that people see, you know, disabled people. Like we it's important to really advocate for ourselves in that arena. So really being able to confront people, like being bold enough to confront someone and say, look, this is not okay, can be confrontational at first, but if you don't do it, like, people are not going to learn. So I find taking the direct approach quite helpful.
And in saying all of this about challenging our friends and everything you've just discussed, how can we navigate social media in a way that promotes body acceptance and mental well-being? Because obviously social media is now an extension of our offline life. So I think it used to be online, offline, and now it's sort of just a part of everything that we do and everything that we are. So what would you say in regards to navigating social media?
I think with social media, one thing that I really advocate for is curation.
Okay.
If there is something that is making you feel horrible in yourself, or is making you feel uneasy, or is bringing up traumatic, triggering feelings, feelings of comparison, delete it, mute it, block it, don't have it in your in your eye line.
I need to do this.
Yeah, I think when it comes to things like Instagram, Twitter, those kinds of things, you want to be able to log on and just have a feeling of joy, have a feeling of seeing images, pieces of content, pieces of art that make you feel happy in yourself, that make you feel happy in your body, that make you feel seen. And so I don't understand the obsession with people going out of their way to follow brands and individuals that make them feel horrible in themselves. Like, if you are somebody who still has issues with your body and all you've ever wanted is to be slim, why would you follow, the Gigi Hadids of the world? Why would you follow people that are making you feel so bitter and feel so horrible in yourself? So for me, like, really early on, I kind of made this pledge to myself on my social media where I'm like, I'm only really going to follow things that bring me joy. So, like, outside of like friends and family and stuff, but I follow loads of plus size women, loads of plus size friendly brands, loads of different content from different communities, especially a lot of oppressed communities, and just seeing some of the beautiful artwork that can stem from these things, seeing the conversations that arise when we get together and we can talk about the things that affect our different communities. One thing that really helped me on my journey was constantly seeing women on my Instagram feed, like plus size women in bikinis, just living their best life.
Yeah.
And because I would wake up every day and I would see these images every day, in my head, now it's normalized. It's normal for me to see plus size women in bikinis.
Yeah.
So then for me, where I started wearing bikinis because it was well, this is normal for me. This is my everyday now because I'm always seeing plus size women in bikinis. So if they can do it, so can I. So for me, it was choosing and being intentional with the brands and the accounts that I follow online. Yes, at times it's good to live in a bubble where you have a lot of people whose thoughts and perspectives align with yours. Every now and again, you can have like a contrarian on there, or you can, have someone who you may not necessarily agree with, but, you get to kind of have a different perspective on an issue. Like, those kinds of things, I think it's good to have a couple of those people sprinkled in, just so that you can so you're not wrapped up in like too much in your bubble. But for the most part, in terms of looking after your mental health, looking after your emotional health, is to just unfollow people that make you feel terrible in yourself, terrible in your body, and to recognize that nearly everything is AI now. So if you see someone on Instagram who has the perfect body, best believe that person doesn't even look like the person in the photo. Like, there are so many dangerous apps like Facetune and FaceApp and Face This and Body Warping. We have celebrities that constantly Photoshop their bodies all the time. And we have to really be attuned to knowing these signs as and when we see them. One great thing I think France did recently is that they've kind of banned that on Instagram, or they've banned it on social media, where it's like you're not allowed to digitally alter your body. And if you do, you have to put a disclaimer.
I saw this, yes.
Yeah. And also, like, I think they've got another thing where if you're doing like an advert or something, you have to disclaim it. Otherwise, you're like, you'll be prosecuted, which I think is so good. France, good. Yeah, France, they don't mess about when it comes to like, that kind of thing. So I think that is something that should kind of be displayed everywhere. The importance of disclaimers, the importance of parents talking to their kids about social media as well. Because unfortunately, back in my day, when you'd get bullied, the bullying was out, once you go home, that was it. But now with bullying at school, it follows you home via social media, and it can be terrible. And so I think having social media literacy as a parent is very important. I think parents need to know what the new apps are, how their kids are able to access the apps, what the hashtags are, like, so that they can speak to their kids and to have their kids be open to telling them stuff that's going on as well. Because a lot of people, if they're feeling things, they may not want to tell their parents or their friends or families. They'll probably just put it online. And so it's important to kind of have parents be educated on how to use these apps, how to use the safeguarding tools on these apps as well.
So we've spoken about taking control, so parents taking control of curating your feed yourself, and then the government having influences on things like regulating disclaimers.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you think that media or fashion or advertising industries and clients better represent diverse body types and challenge the existing beauty ideals? So I think that's the hardest thing to shift the dial on. But what would you say in regards to those bigger companies that have the influence and are making the content? How can we sort of make a change there?
I think one of the first ways to make a change is to diversify who is taking control behind the scenes.
True.
That has been a big thing for me. So if you have a casting agency, for instance, and they're casting models for an advert, unfortunately, and I used to, before I started doing this full time, I used to work at an advertising agency and a PR agency.
I work at a media agency right now.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. And you know, I absolutely loved it, but I was always the only Black person there. And I was the only fat person there. And it was one of those things where it was like, if you are in control of what somebody sees on TV or in print, and everybody around you is white and slim, then naturally when it comes to casting, you're only going to be casting people that look like you, that who shows up in your everyday as normal.
Yeah. Like curating your feed, what you said, like about
curating
what you see every day. Yeah.
Exactly. And so if you're only seeing slim white people around you, naturally you're just going to cast slim white people. And so I think it's so important for there to be diversity behind the scenes. We need to have, you know, people of all abilities, body shapes and races and ethnicities being directors, casting directors, producers, booking agents, all of these kinds of things. Back in the day, I used to work with this German plus size brand called Navabi. And one of their social media coordinator was this amazing woman called Bethany Rutter, who is now an author. But she's plus size and she was their social media person. And what I loved about Navabi is that they actually use plus size women in their ad campaigns, as opposed to the fast fashion where they'll have a plus size brand, but they're using size 12 models for their plus size brand.
And there's no photo where it goes beyond size 16. It's just like, it's just like you're clicking on, it'll be like size, 22, and the photo is still of a size 8 model. Yeah. Like when I've been shopping lately, I've been literally noticing that yesterday when I was shopping for Glastonbury outfits. I was like, how is anyone meant to know what this would look like potentially on their body if they're a plus size person?
Exactly. It's ridiculous. And so, with Bethany, because she was plus size, she knew what she wanted to see. So nearly exclusively all the models were like a size 24, size 26. And it was so refreshing. And it's just like, this is what we need to see. We need to have plus size people behind the realm. I am shameless when it comes to like self-promotion. Like I'm one of those ones where I'm like, look, I want to be a contributing editor for a big magazine, whether it's Harper's, whether it's Vogue, Elle, In Style. I hope so. I really do, because I think it's about time that we have plus size people being at the helm of like fashion editing as well. Because even within the fashion world, like plus size fashion is worth £9 billion at the moment, and it's a huge market, but all of the writers are slim and thin, and I just think there needs to be more plus size writers. There needs to be just more diversity behind the scenes, because only then can we then see the diversity in front of the scenes. Because as a person behind the scenes with the power, you want to be able to see yourself represented on screen or within pages of a magazine. So naturally, you're going to be quite diverse in who you're looking for.
100%.
And so, it's all just, decolonizing the structures that are in place, that have been in place for hundreds of years. It just kind of needs to be all broken down.
Yeah, and that leads really well into one of my final questions. As a prominent figure in the plus size fashion community, how do you see the industry evolving in terms of inclusivity and representation? So I know you spoke about having more diversity behind the scenes so that projects to what we see in everyday life, but what other changes would you like to see in the near future?
What would I like to see? I think collaboration between because it's very common now in the industry to see collaborations, especially when it comes to things like fashion and beauty and you know, all of these things between creators and the brands. I still think that there's quite a lot more that could be done within that arena. I think it's important for, especially when it comes to fashion and things like that, because with fashion, it's so closely tied to confidence and how we express ourselves and how we want the world to see us. I think that's such a strong connection. And so I think, you know, there was a time where brands were collaborating with plus size influencers on clothing collections and things like that. But not only is it not happening as much, but what we're seeing is that they're only now using people that are a lot smaller, which is really, really annoying. And so I think to kind of have that collaboration between creatives or creatives of different backgrounds and different abilities with brands, I think could be really, really powerful. I would like for us to, I'm not really sure. Do you know what? I'm trying to choose my words carefully because I don't want to come across as like this bitter old fart. But I would like for there to be conversations around the mid-sized community, how that came about and how it's kind of piggybacked off of the work of plus size advocates. I think that's an important conversation to have. I think, you know, and I've said this quite a few times on my channels and with the mid-sized community and how that kind of really gained prominence during lockdown and the pandemic, because you had people that were suddenly putting on weight because they were at home. And so they needed new fashion inspiration and, you know, they needed to turn to people for confidence and things like that. So, you know, you had a lot of people who were like a size 12, between a size 12 to 16, suddenly coming out of nowhere and talking about how to dress for your new body and all of that kind of stuff, which is great. But it's become a thing where it's kind of taken over what was supposed to be the body positive community. And I think a lot of people now feel a bit ostracized, or they don't feel represented by the community anymore, because what that community does is it reinforces the fact that it kind of just reinforces or revalidates that there's only one way to be curvy, which is flat, hourglass shaped, you know, big bum, conventionally pretty. I think it still leaves out the larger plus size people in the community. That's why I've always been a bit like, I just feel like body positivity is just repackaged mid-size movement, because it tends to just focus on a conventional fat or a pretty fat or an acceptable fat. And so I think it's important to kind of have these conversations about privileged bodies and what privilege means to us as well, because I think people can become quite offended if they are mid-sized and somebody bigger than them says you live in a privileged bodies. I think the first instance would be quite defensive, because it's like, well, you know, I'm a size 16 and I've gone through stuff too, which is absolutely valid, of course. Like, nobody is able to, or nobody should tell somebody that they haven't gone through something because they're smaller. But I think when it comes to like the levels of fat phobia and the levels of harassment and abuse and structural and systemic fat phobia and abuse, there unfortunately there is kind of a hierarchy when it comes to that, and the bigger you are, the more you're likely to experience those kinds of things. And so I think it's important to kind of have these conversations with brands about what it means to be or to promote plus sizes as well. So if you're making clothing that goes up to a size 28, I also want to see size 28 models. You know, I want to see size actual, like, big people wearing the clothing, because I'm not going to buy a dress worn on someone that's a size 12 that has no love handles, no bingo wings, no, you know, they're just perfectly hourglass shaped, because that dress is not going to look like that on me. And I would rather see it on someone who has a similar body shape to mine. So having conversations with brands about just having a lot more inclusivity within their campaigns. I would like to see more fat people in the media whose characterizations do not revolve around trauma and fat phobia. I would like to see happy people, successful people, people in love, in great relationships who aren't the subject of comedy or, you know, oh, poor, fat, stupid person. You know, I want to be able to see more roles in the community, more characters, more, you know, plus size people on TV actually living their best lives, as opposed to always being on TV talking, like, you know, fretting about their weight or being made fun of, or, you know, being the bumbling character kind of thing. Like, it would be nice to kind of have that representation.
Yeah. Oh, this has been such an amazing chat, and you've given so much actionable advice, which is always really important, especially for people who are listening along and maybe they're just learning about this sort of thing. It's just been absolutely amazing, and thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This was really fun. Thank
really
you.
Fun. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed my chat with Steph. Please let me know on any of my socials if you've got any stories or thoughts of your own to share. Peace.